All right, there we go. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching The Naturalist Capitalist, and I'm Reed Coverdale. And I've got a special guest on the show today, the radical independent, the political stranger, or Dave TV, or whatever he is. It changes every 10 minutes. So what is it right now, Dave?
You're right. It has been changing. Unity Politics is where I'm at right now. Unity Politics over on Twitter and on YouTube. Yes.
All right, sweet. So you're the first guy who gave me a platform before I started my show, and it was helpful. It actually got some people that come over and check me out. But I've been following you for like probably 6-7 months or so, and it's because I was a Tulsi Gabbard supporter myself last summer. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your channel, what you've been doing, and then about kind of the recent changes you've been going through since she dropped out and all the hysteria that's been going on.
Yeah. Well, my main intent originally was to create a platform to help Tulsi, and that was what my channel was about, really, for about 10, 11 months, I would say. It was all Tulsi all the time with an occasional other video, but people were lapping up that content pretty good in those days, and I was getting a lot of new subscribers, and things were going well for the most part. And then Tulsi dropped out, and the way she dropped out was not a good thing at that time for me. I've since gone through the 4 stages of grief and have dealt with the way she dropped out, and obviously she endorsed Vice President Joe Biden. And I've worked through that. I've rationalized and so forth. But then I started thinking to myself, well, really, how radical am I? And that's when I started to go through this identity crisis, is that I'm not really a radical. I'm somebody who I think would like the political system to work. I would like to see person A trying to work with person B, meaning the blue team works with the red team to get something done. Maybe that thing looks a little purple or it looks a little gold, as you libertarians would say at the end of the day. So I've been wrestling with identity. I felt like a refugee, not a vigilante, but a refugee, and gone through several names of the channel. I finally decided to say, you know what? My main goal is not that I'm a moderate on everything, but I would say I would prefer moderation over extremism. And what I'm seeing mostly on the left these days has really scared me. And I've also been ingesting some alternative news in addition to, and when I say alternative, I mean things that if you post it on Facebook, it will get taken down. Some of this stuff I tried to send private messages using Messenger to my wife, and it got flagged, and immediately this content is not suitable, and it's a private message between myself and my wife. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, we are living in very strange times. And you can also apply this to what's happening with COVID-19. There's a lot of alternative views out there about mask wearing, which, you can't really talk about too loudly, or people are going to call you some kind of a mask denier and so forth. So between those two issues, between the violence I'm seeing around the country, initially when all that went down with George Floyd, I mean, I'm still sympathetic to that moment, and looking at that 20-something minutes of tape, thinking to myself, wow, that's bad. But you have to kind of look at the entire picture and what that moment did. What kind of a chain reaction did that set off? That has nothing, tearing statues down, in my estimation, has nothing to do with that moment, other than saying, well, the whole system is rotten to the core and we need to flatten it down. I've seen some really wacky progressive tweets out there saying, well, if you can't do it the peaceful way, then this is the way you need to do it. No, No, I mean, none of the alternative parties, whether it's Green Party, which I've completely given up on because they're not serious. That's another thing that happened. The Libertarian Party believes in peace, right? There's no war agenda within the Libertarian Party. The old time Democrats from the 70s, they were kind of like, hey, peace, love, man, anti-war, make love, not war. I remember that was a big slogan. Republicans tend to be war hawks, but we've had Republicans in the past, like President Reagan, for instance, who really got a lot done without having to, like, start a war anywhere. I know there were a couple of things that he was doing, but nothing compared to where we're at now. And if anything, I think if you like the warfare state, not only do we have the warfare state all over the world, but now we've brought it home. So, right. I mean, this is an amazing thing to see. Hey, endless war, home and abroad. And this is why the unity message is important to me now, because we need to say, hey, we need cooler heads. We need people to think through these issues. We need politicians to work together, put down the partisan crap, put down your team jersey for a moment. The fact that if Trump does something good, for instance, then it has to be opposed because it's Donald Trump. Same thing could happen with Democrats. I haven't seen much of it lately. Tulsi Gabbard, I think she tries to pass legislation and so forth, and I'm not sure how much success she's having. Tulsi, if anything, lately, she has irritated me a little bit about her mask PSAs that she's basically been running constantly. And Tulsi, you're very independent-minded. You must know that there are alternative views on this one topic, but she's really bought into it. But I still think she, as a president at this time, would be a unifier, somebody to bring people together. So that's why my shift has gone away from, I think there are authoritarians among us, and they are in the Green Party. They are in the neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party, and even in some of the progressive precincts within. And they like to tell you, what the progressives do? They like to say, yes, I'm for free speech. But man, what you just said was hate speech. Yeah. I go, okay, well, that's, I hate to tell you, the way the founders drafted this whole thing was free speech was directed at the most egregious kinds of speech. You can read book after book on the topic. I'm not a brainiac on this topic, but I know for a fact that it's the kind of speech, other than yelling fire in a crowded theater, you can say whatever you want to say without recourse. And now people are getting doxxed. People are losing their jobs. And for stating things that are factual, like not gray stuff, but black and white stuff, they're just saying this is, I read this here. I saw a doctor post this who is an expert in immunology or whatever. And then all of a sudden now you can't do that because it runs against the narrative. So right. I'm really worried about speech. I'm really worried about safety. And I understand the police state. I understand the fears that people have in the police state. I'm not saying just trust the police, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when push comes to shove, I don't own a firearm. I think you do, but I don't. I want and that's a good thing, by the way. I've never been against 2A. I've always been a Second Amendment. In fact, I posted on Twitter the other day that, with all of this civil unrest going on, looks like the Second Amendment's going to have a big revival. But most of the people on the left, and I'm not saying all, but most, say, well, we need tougher restrictions, we need background checks, and we need this and that and the other. Yeah, you can have different kind of background checks, psych evaluation, whatever it is, but that doesn't mean that, those people in St. Louis who were out in front of their house, they did nothing wrong. Right. No matter how you want to slice that issue, they didn't do anything wrong, other than the fact that they obviously don't know how to brandish a weapon. They're just like, that was a little clumsy, but,
like what you're really getting at, and
sorry.
No, you're fine. what you're really digging into here is the loss of the concept of absolute truth. And I'm actually an atheist, but I do believe in absolute truth.
Yeah.
And I think that society has completely lost that concept. So what was attractive about someone like Tulsi Gabbard is, she would agree with Trump if he did something that aligned with her agenda, where what you're saying is everyone else will just say, oh, Trump said it, so it's bad. So it's completely subjective. It's whichever team says whatever thing, that's what makes it good or bad, not the content of what is actually being said. So to me, that's actually why I stand behind the Libertarian Party, because the Libertarian Party is the party of rule of law, and that's easy to confuse with law and order, but rule of law. The rule of law is the government is there to protect you, your property, and your rights, and a lot of us would say the environment. And then aside from that, it's not there to do anything. So it's there to make sure that everyone is treated equally, and there's no subjectivity to it. If you're a woman, if you're gay, if you're black, if you're white, if it doesn't matter. Like, you are all humans, and you all have the exact same rights before the law. And I think that's what this society desperately needs, because, as you said, it's completely dependent on who is saying what. It doesn't matter the subject material of what's being said. And I know you have a lot of Tulsi supporters on your show. I have been, I guess you could say, a critic of hers lately to a point. But the reason I have is because, in my opinion, in some areas, she's turned her back on what she said she was supporting during the primary. So voting for the HEROES Act, or voting for, or co-sponsoring the TRACE Act, or not criticizing the establishment anymore. The reasons I supported her were they were objective. It didn't matter that she was a Democrat or whatever label she wanted to put to her. She agreed with me on, I'd say, like 75% of the issues, and that was cool. I was like, okay, I disagree with her on some of these things, but that's fine. This is what I agree with. And so I was sticking to a strict idea and saying, all right, I can get behind this because this lines up with my values. What a lot of Tulsi supporters have done, and not just Tulsi supporters, Bernie supporters, Trump supporters, like you name it, they get hooked on the cult of personality, or the label. If Tulsi says it, it's good. You see a lot of these bills that she's supported. Like, if you told a bunch of Tulsi supporters, knowing what they're generally like, about the TRACE Act, if you told them what it was, they would be like, no, are you kidding? That's terrible. But then the second he co-sponsors it, it's like, oh, well, okay, well, let's look deeper at it. Okay, actually, this isn't that, then they start glossing it over. So what I'm really standing for is the idea of getting behind ideas and things that don't change, values that are consistent. And when you don't do that, society falls apart, and that's what we're seeing happen right now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you're an atheist, I'm a Christian, and that bill, the number on that bill, by the way, was 666, had one extra 6, so it was like the mark of the beast plus another one, So, people, and again, I'm kind of doing a little tongue-in-cheek here because you have to laugh at something, but people were saying, can you believe this? And everybody's signing on to it, and we've got a contact trace, and they're going to come to your house. I was like, they're coming to my house. Okay. I'm not coming out of my house in that case. I'm just going to barricade myself in the house. I mean, it's bad enough at times you got these census workers that are all crawling around getting into your stuff, but now you're going to have contact tracers that are going to come and find out where you've been. So, that was a bad idea. That was, and it's still a bad idea, like you said. And ideas really should, like you were talking about objective truth. And I think right now, because of the political climate, people kind of want to make a mockery of anybody who makes a black and white statement. Like, I believe X. Like, I'm Reed, and this is what I believe. Guns save lives. How dare you say something like that? Guns kill people. No, guns can kill people, but in the process, they can actually save lives. The two things, this is my unity project here, the two things can be true at the same time. Donald Trump can be an orange baboon who's a buffoon, who can sometimes bloviate so much that you're like, okay, please stop talking. But out of his mouth could actually come some idea that may be beneficial. Now, those two things can exist. All right. It's tough for some people. They have, as my friend Jess likes to say, they have hard case of TDS and they can't get over it. They can't understand how our country elected such a man. Oh, it's easy. It's easy to know. It's not that Americans were stupid. Americans were driven, were pushed into a corner of another establishment hack who bleach-bitted her computer so she wouldn't be found out. She didn't do it. Her aides did it. But all of these things that, oh, I had no idea. And then you had this businessman who didn't have a political track record. So because of that, it was like, okay, let's take a chance on the billionaire. And we did. And quite honestly, if you're going to give me sodium pentothal, and I'm going to tell you, well, yeah, Trump or Hillary, Trump all day long, 7 times a week, twice on Sunday. I mean, I'm not saying he's a great president or anything like that, but, you know, between the two of them, you had an establishment Democrat who had basically been saber rattling as Secretary of State, even when Obama was like, I don't know if we should do this, and Hillary's like, go, go, go. And I'm like, really? Do we want that in the White House? You know, what did she say? We came, we saw, he died. I mean, come on. I mean, even John Bolton doesn't talk like that. And well, he does. He does. He probably does worse. But anyway, I was just trying to explain that you can look at, see, if imagine this for a second. I'll let you talk. Imagine if the Democrats said, okay, Trump won. How could we work with Donald Trump, try to get along with Donald Trump, still maybe score some political points by getting along with him? They just didn't want him to score any points. So what they did would say, okay, we're willing to pass stupid laws to restrict behavior, to punish Americans because Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Seriously, think of how crazy and screwed up that is. And you wonder why there are people who walk among us who want nothing to do with anything political.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give you the floor, Reed.
So 2 things. One is I agree with you that I do like Donald Trump, or I don't want to use the word like. I dislike him a little bit less than Hillary and Biden. The only problem is the anti-establishment people, and even a lot of like libertarians and even some progressives for some reason, they don't look at Donald Trump as nearly as dangerous as he is. Like, he is very, very bad. He's against almost everything that these people say they stand for. You know, he's against the Second Amendment in a lot of ways, in my opinion. He's for the police state. He's for the military state, you know, the military-industrial complex. He's barely done anything against it. And he's for sky-high spending. I mean, he's for all these things that a lot of people from my side of the aisle say that they're absolutely against. But it's again, that subjective idea I was talking about earlier. It's Trump's doing it, so it's fine. If Trump, you know, I ask them all the time, if Obama had banned bump stocks, can you imagine? Like, they would have lost their minds. But Trump does it. It's like, oh, finally someone's passing common sense gun laws. You know. But then the other thing I was going to say is it's kind of something else you've been talking about. I don't really watch independent media anymore, other than like you. I actually want more people to watch people like you and Dak Rouleau, because and when I say independent media, I guess I mean independent progressive media, like Jimmy Dore and what's his name there, the guy that Kyle Kulinski, but then Graham Elwood. You know, I can't take it anymore. Like, I used to watch it because I was like, I can agree with these guys on a bunch of stuff, but they're turning into the Young Turks. I mean, they become their echo chamber of absolute insanity and ridiculousness.
Yeah.
now, you know, those were the people who during the primary were against cancel culture. Now, if you would disagree with them, you're a fascist. I mean, so I just can't watch it anymore. So that's why I'm really trying to boost my channel, people like you, because I want people who don't live in a bubble. You know, I'm a truck driver. I'm a blue collar worker. I see people all the time. I know how the world works. I'm not just sitting in a studio somewhere in California just pumping out all this content, you know, as if I'm some sort of savior. And I don't think you do that either. I think people need to listen to people like us. You know what I mean?
Well, I have, like I always say, and I mean it, I don't say it to be, what's the word, glib or condescending, but I have a platform that earns me money. We talked before we started rolling here, and I talk music. I'm wearing a Van Halen t-shirt today because I did a video a little while ago about the band and so forth, and it's what I've been doing it's like my job, per se, and it came out of nowhere because I was a stay-at-home dad, and I had gotten laid off from a job, and I had this, anyway, long story short is I turned it into something where I can actually earn money, and my wife works too, so we have two incomes, and you know, it's worked out. It's kind of a dream come true because I can do what I love and get paid for it, you know. But as far as what you were saying about, I really need to jump in about the progressives. There was, and you may disagree with why I decided. I have another friend. He and I do videos sometimes together. Charles, the Vigilant Independent, really good guy. Maybe you and him.
Yeah.
He's a blue collar dude too, man. He's a really nice guy, and he's kind of up to here with this virtue signaling, name calling. I was watching a Jimmy Dore episode, and this is where I kind of I literally I didn't unsubscribe or anything. I guess I can, but I didn't bother doing that. But this New York police guy, like he was like a union guy, was up talking about what New York police officers were going through at the time, and he gave this really powerful, heartfelt speech. Now, I understand what police unions do, so I understand that side of the issue, but Jimmy Dore was like making fun of this guy, and it was weird to me. It was like, okay, he's pouring his heart out. He's saying that the police are getting attacked, which they are. The police, there are a lot of things that police are going through right now, where if you're a police officer, do you want to answer that call? If you're in Chicago right now, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because, you know, do we go to answer that call, or do we take a different route to get there, and maybe it'll be over by the time we get there? Seriously, I mean, we're living in a time where we've said to a certain group of people within society that it's okay. You do what you're going to do. We're going to stand down. Imagine a military operation where you're told to stand down. How safe is that? How effective is that? And Jimmy Dore is out there basically, you know, doing this thing where he's making fun of these New York cops, and I was like, dude, that is a bad take. I get it. There are problems with, and again, as I said to my friend Charles, the police issue is a lot like COVID-19. You isolate, and then you move those bad germs, those bad cops out of circulation. And you may have to do different types of policing. There are other things. Militarization of the police, I think, is a bad thing. Trump last week did this speech. I don't know if you saw it. You probably would have cringed, being a libertarian. But he's like, yeah, I got all this equipment that we had, and we said, sure, I sent it. We had I think he was talking to Sean Hannity, and he said, we got all this stuff down to the police. I'm like, dude, why do you think? I mean, they're rolling through streets with these armored Humvees. Do you think people are going to feel really good about themselves at that point? So anyway, the progressives have that, and this is one of the reasons. The Green Party, I was like, no, I'm done. You guys are nuts, and plus you're not serious about winning. That was the other issue. You know, Howie Hawkins does this interview. Well, you know, I don't know. Maybe we'll get to the presidency. Probably not. But hey, we're in there, and you know, we provide Bernie people a place where they can go vote. Okay, yeah, that's great. You know, those Bernie people, the smaller. This is the other thing too. People don't realize that this real narrow progressive group of people. It's a very loud group of people, but it's a very narrow group of people.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I live in conservative Republicanville, and everybody I meet is a conservative Republican. And they are, because of what the left is doing, at least the people in my area, they're motivated. They're like, we're the silent majority. We'll show them. We're going out. We don't want these masks. We're going out to vote. A lot of them have a lot of libertarian views. They want to be left alone. They want to earn a living. This is another issue. Don't tell me I can't earn a living. You're putting, unless you pass a law. I said that to my wife the other day. I said, they just can't say we're mandating masks. They have to go to the state house and vote on it, or go to the Congress and say, and put a time limit. And imagine the sunset on that sucker, huh? When is that going to go away, right? I mean, if they pass a law, Reed, we better just like, we better start storing up food or something, because what the heck is going to happen next? So anyway, as you can tell, I'm a little off the hook right now.
No, it's good, and I actually want to talk about a couple things you mentioned there. The progressive left has lost any direction with where this could have gone. So right after the George Floyd murder, I was still in Colorado at that time, and I went to a protest, and I had a sign, and it said, "End qualified immunity, end civil asset forfeiture, demilitarize the police, vote Libertarian." So, and I was amidst this group of a bunch of loud, angry people, and I talked to probably 100 of them. And I asked them, "Do you know about anything on this sign?" And I think like 3 people knew what everything was that I was talking about. And so I was there to try to point them in a direction. And to the people who didn't know what any of those things were, I said, look, you can protest here for months. You can stand out here and scream and march and hold signs up. But unless you have a solution for the problem, it doesn't matter if you protest. I mean, I think protesting is an important step, but only if you know what exactly you're protesting and what you want to do moving forward. And to me, the left, a lot of it right now, is just angry and is not solution-based at all. The only person on the left that I've really still respected is Kim Iverson. I've been kind of watching her stuff, and she used to be on Twitter. She hasn't for a while, but she was calling out a lot of the bullshit that the left has been doing. And she was saying, this isn't about solutions anymore. This isn't about hating brutality. This is about hating America. This is about just being angry at the world. And you guys are watching this. And I totally agree. I think the other thing is, look at the people in Congress who are presenting solution. I think Rand Paul has introduced like 4 criminal justice bills in the last couple months, and they end no-knock raids. They end civil asset forfeiture, and then Justin Amash introduced a bill to end qualified immunity. If the progressive left were really serious about this, they would be presenting solutions that they know would fix the problem and they know would pass. But instead, they're just throwing virtue signaling at defund the police, abolish the police, get rid of the police. And it's just a joke. And this is actually something where I'm kind of disappointed in Tulsi too, because she hasn't been jumping on board with a lot of these bills that would actually solve the problem. She even voted for the Democrat omnibus bill, I forget what it's called, but the police reform bill. And then right after she voted for it, she did a video on how useless the vote was and how it's not going to pass and how partisan it is. It's like, well, why don't you co-sponsor Justin Amash's bill to end qualified immunity then? This is what's so annoying, is all these people virtue signaling and saying, oh, things could be so much better, but this is all we have. It's like, no, it's not all we have. We have people who are presenting these bills and have these ideas that will solve the problem, but none of you guys are endorsing them or co-sponsoring their bills, and so nothing changes, Yeah.
Well, again, there are a couple of things I could address with that. The thought did occur to me, and it's occurred to me recently, and I know it's a really low percentage chance, but Biden does need somebody who's young and healthy and a woman of color and somebody with military experience. And again, it would be very similar to when John McCain picked Sarah Palin to run with in a different way, mind you, in a much different way, because Tulsi Gabbard is smart, whereas, well anyway, the point. So if Tulsi has a number of these neoliberal votes to lean on leading into a possible selection, she could say, look, as I'm very independent minded, but as you can see here, I line up well with the presumptive nominee, Vice President Biden, on all of these issues, because of course the neoliberal establishment will be pulling their hair out if Tulsi were to be selected. But you do make some points about, she does have these interesting, I would call them independent streaks, but sometimes I call them neoliberal streaks.
Yes.
I mean, I wish she would just, the campaign trail, she was a different person. Yes. She was a different person. When COVID hit, she became someone else. And I'm sorry to just throw it on COVID, but it's like she kind of said, okay, just let's kind of, bring in, just round the horses up and just kind of close things off and go with the flow and try to, keep my head down and just do what I'm supposed to do here for the rest of my term. Yeah. It's a sad thing to see because she's smarter than that. But people like you are saying, how come she's not working with Amash? How come she's not sponsoring like she did before all these great bills where it was independent, it was ahead of the curve, and now she seems to be swimming with the stream of, I hate to say it, swamp creatures, and it's not a good look for her. And I love her. I think she'd be a great president, but again, we have to look at everything in proportion to what's out there. Are we going to get Joe Jorgensen as president? It's a kind of a long shot. There are a number of things that can happen, and Joe too at times has got to be a little more careful. Hey, don't just throw all the Tulsi Gabbard supporters under the bus. Right. That wasn't a smart move by her. Just say, look, I disagree with Tulsi on a lot of, me and you used to talk this way. I don't agree with you on all economic issues, but Tulsi had some great ideas during that campaign. She was really the only voice in the Democratic primary that was against, the warfare state, full strength, 100%. And she should have been able to kind of, maneuver there politically, and she did not. And it hurt because there were a lot of people on Twitter that were like, oh, okay, Joe Jorgensen, nope. But I mean, that makes your job. By the way, I am still open to a Joe Jorgensen vote. I am definitely still open to it. It's either going to be her or Donald Trump at this stage for me. And those are the two. I know he's cringeworthy, but I'm in a swing state, and I'm in a state that the Democrats want to win. And, not to say throwing my vote away, but I am one of those. I'm a literal swing voter here. So my vote, they should all be knocking on my door, breaking it down, convincing me that they'd be best for the country. But they're not gonna. I'm gonna have to make this decision, and I'm sure my one vote won't decide it. Although back in 2000 it was only like 500. So, and the Supreme Court. So, you never know. I may be a kingmaker down here. So people they better start sending me vodka right away. That's all I can say.
A couple things you said there. One thing, the reason I really liked Tulsi, I did agree with her on an overwhelming majority of the issues, but the other thing was that I saw someone who was willing to buck the party line or buck the consensus. The big thing she did was go to Syria and meet with Assad. That was like, that is immediately cool. But then the other thing was she was not willing to feed into the craziness of the Democratic Party. So like, whether or not you agree with her on abortion, she was the only one who was willing to take a moderate stance on abortion on the debate stage. Yeah. I would say gun control, I disagreed with some of the measures she still wanted, but she was not willing to give into the frothy, crazy confiscatory ideas that literally every other candidate, including Bernie Sanders, even though people like to give him a pass, were into. She was not willing to do that. So I thought that was really cool. you guys can look at my channel from I think about like 8 months ago. I actually made a video called Ron, Rand, Tulsi, and it was explaining why I supported those three candidates and the parallels I saw. But as I was making that video, it really struck me that Rand Paul was way more bipartisan than Tulsi Gabbard. It really stuck out to me that Tulsi, she voted like 98.5% of the time with the Democrats. And there were these extremely isolated incidents where she would make waves, but it wasn't a consistent pattern. It was just occasionally she would, she'd vote present, or she wouldn't vote for some crazy bill. But if you really looked at it, she was mostly a party line voter. And then when she got a lot of traction with people like me and people like you, she started to kind of change her tune, and she started talking about the debt and things like that, stuff that she never talked about before. And so then I realized that, maybe after she dropped out and she started voting for these omnibus bills, it felt like a betrayal, but maybe it was really just her going back to who she really was. Maybe during the campaign, we struck a chord with her and it was bringing out a different person, but then when it failed, it just kind of went back to who she was. And that, to me, that really sucks. I mean, because I know her personally. I worked on her campaign in New Hampshire. If you told her, hey, I know Reed Coverdale, she would know who you're talking about. I had extensive conversations with her about a lot of issues, and so it really hurts. But what I realize is we need people who are going to commit political suicide to just stand against the bullshit going on.
Yeah.
So like Thomas Massey committing political suicide over the CARES Act. Although it looks like he's probably going to win again. So, that's fine. Rand Paul with the Anti-Lynching Bill. I don't know if you know anything about this, but if you read that bill, it does not make lynching a federal hate crime. Lynching is already a federal hate crime. All that does is, make it so that you can get mandatory minimums for property damage and things that you should not be going to prison for 10 years for. But he's willing, even though that might not be a huge issue right now, he's still willing. We need people who are willing to just die on the front lines to stop this madness, because the amendments are not helping us anymore. Like Bernie Sanders can sneak in a little amendment here about unemployment on the CARES Act, but we're already seeing, like, I'm sure you've seen reports of it, all the trillions of dollars that went to businesses that weren't supposed to get money under the under the requirements they were supposed to be able to apply for. So we need people who, even if they're not going to get their bills passed, we need people who are just going to say no, 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 no. And if they don't do that, we need to vote them out. This is kind of contradictory with what you're saying about working together. And I do think we need to work together on some things. But there's some things that are just sucking us dry and killing us, like the wars, mass incarceration, spending. And I think we just really need people who are going to say, nope, and I don't care if I get kicked out next election. I'm just going to say no and not go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, here's the thing. I agree with the spirit of what you're saying. I really do. I want to, it's like, hate to use the biblical stuff here, use a little Christianity, but Jesus with the money changers, and he had these whips, and he was like, it's like, get out of this is a house of worship, get out. And it's the only time in the his entire ministry where he got really pissed off was people are in, basically like Jimmy Swaggart was holed up inside of his church, and so it was, the spirit of that was, you guys are just, I can't, and we need action. We need to basically go nuclear, to use a political term that was popular a couple of years ago. It's not as popular now, but when I look around, I see, there's an old song by Jerry Rafferty and this group that he was in from the 70s. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. And it's like, I look on either side and I say to myself, you know what? I mean, they're both crazy. They're both crazy. Now, I will say this. I am, in some ways, I've been red-pilled. Like I told my friend Charles, I've been red-pilled when it comes to safety. I want the police to come and keep me safe. Now, do I want rogue police officers? Nobody. See, this is a dumb argument. It's a dumb argument. You want all these crazy cops that are hopped up on steroids to go out there and start. Yeah, I do. I want them to go and protect me from people that are going to do me harm. My unity message is more of, okay, stop, like what you were talking about earlier with the left and how it's this dumpster fire, and each day they're just throwing more crap into the dumpster, and whoosh, and it goes up some more, and you're like, when is this going to seriously? People are wondering when are they going to stop? I mean, they're all worried. I know you and I might disagree with what's going on in Portland right now because of the way it's being done. Supposedly people are being scooped off this is the left narrative though, so I don't know if it's true, but people are being scooped off the streets and put into unmarked cars. These innocent, peaceful, wonderful protesters are just being scooped up and taken away in an unmarked car and probably just thrown off a bridge somewhere, and they'll never be seen again, according to the narrative. When we don't know what, I know that Trump basically said he's not going to put up with the stuff that's been happening. And these states, like you said at the beginning of this, is that the government is supposed to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic. And here we are with people who say, our goal is Marxism. That's what it says on the, people said when I posted something about this, they said, well, where'd you get this from? Their charter. I went and looked on their website, and it said, we are, and the two leaders that you can go look it up. It's on you, or was on YouTube, probably got scrubbed down, but we are trained Marxists. Okay, if you're on the progressive left and you're okay with Marxism, this is what I do with you. Yeah. Goodbye. So you're a libertarian. Libertarians, and I have libertarian tendencies and so forth. Libertarianism and Marxism, no, they don't go together.
Yeah. So a couple things there. One is I have kind of looked into the thing going on in Portland, and it does scare the shit out of me. I got to be honest. So what is different between the police being brutes and Antifa being brutes is it's legal for the police to be brutes. You know?
Okay. All right.
When you have the state backing thugs, that's when it's dangerous. So I think it's important that the government does protect people and their property, but it needs to be extremely transparent. And they need to be held accountable. That's why I support all these ideas like getting rid of qualified immunity, civil asset forfeiture. The police shouldn't have tanks, like all these things. So I think that it's important also to realize just because the oppressed are not perfect doesn't mean that they should be oppressed. So it's kind of like the Middle East. Like, yeah, Iraq was not a good place to live in 2002, but it doesn't mean that what we did was okay. It's the same deal. Like I disagree with a lot of the political motives of Black Lives Matter. The actual organization. I obviously am not a Marxist. I'm the polar opposite of that. But their plight is reasonable in a lot of ways. A lot of the things that they're protesting are important, and in my opinion, if libertarians don't stand behind those principles, then the Marxists will get all that political draw. That's why I went to that political rally. That Black Lives Matter rally, because I wanted to prove to people that I was there in solidarity with them, but I had actual solutions that were going to solve the problems on both sides. They were going to protect people from the police, but it's also not ridiculous ideas like abolishing all police departments, so I think that reasonable people have to get behind these ideas, or the crazies will grab all the people who sympathize with them. So this is why I'm trying really hard to get the Libertarian Party to embrace protecting the environment, because if they don't, we end up with the Green New Deal, or we end up with, I think a lot of people do care about the environment, but I also think there are a lot of socialists who will use the environment as a catalyst to gain control, and so if you don't have free market people saying, look, there are solutions we can give, and we can have some basic regulations to protect water and protect the air, then, we won't alienate all these people, because you'll have someone who is a nature lover who will be like, well, the only one who is supporting my idea is the far left, and so I'm going to go with them. And to me, it's a tragedy, because it's like, no, we should be reaching out to those people. We should be trying to give them solutions, or we're going to fade into oblivion and irrelevancy.
Yeah. I would, about your commentary about the stuff going on in Portland, what I would say is this, and I think it was pretty cool how you went down to the protest and actually got a taste of what was happening there, and tried to express solidarity in what I would call maybe a little bit more of an intellectually coherent way, which I don't think a lot of people understand what was on your placard. But I could say this is that it's one thing to be for Black lives. It's one thing to be pro Black lives and to say that all, I can't say all lives matter, I guess, but to look at everybody, I know I'm censoring myself, but to look at everybody and say, yeah, we have a problem here. It's another thing to destroy property. It's another thing to carry weapons down the street when, again, you're supposedly part of a movement. I said this the other day on Twitter. You guys are not too big on 2A, but yet you're walking down the street and you're brandishing a firearm probably obtained illegally, and at that moment you become kind of this vigilante that you're saying is that the rest of your crew is kind of saying is evil, and in law-abiding folks, they need to put down their weapons and so forth, or at least have a more regulated way of owning and operating firearms. I think the thing that is a little concerning to me is that distinction between what I would call honest Martin Luther King style decent people who are feeling as though their voices aren't being heard, and then this mob, because it's a popular word, I'm just going to use it, that has kind of infiltrated and is definitely tarnishing it, making it bad for the rest of the people, like, in a way, like you, we're trying to say, hey, there are all these things that we could do right away to help this problem, demilitarize the police, end qualified immunity, do all these things that, quite honestly, they're not really they weren't that talked about until this moment when some smart people got together and they started using a lot of libertarians, I hear this from, and it's a weird dynamic that we're living in, because, and I had this problem with you when I was saying the Green Party's the way to go, because on the other end of the spectrum, they look at libertarian economics and they go, oh, your remedies for the economy, it's going to crush the cities, going to keep blacks sort of down and hurt by all of these economic pressures that weigh on them, and they're just used as pawns in these corporate Ponzi schemes and so forth. And I've come a little toward your point of view through this, because I don't know how endlessly giving people money is going to motivate them for themselves to get out of their own dilemma. You know what I mean? It's like, at a certain point, hey, I'm here to help you, but eventually I'm going to give you a fishing rod and I'm going to let you go. You know what I mean? I'm going to walk away, and you're going to do this yourself. But if we continue to do what we're doing, and we could talk about, this monetary theory that's out there right now, is you just print and digitize money endlessly. This is a nightmare. See, I was coming from the side where I was watching Jimmy Dore every night, and he's saying, hey, who cares? They're printing money anyway. Just give it to the people who need it the most. It's all a disaster. You can't just keep doing it. Why is there a coin shortage right now? Is anybody asking that question? This is what I've read in books, is this is the beginning of the end of money. Okay. Yes. And it may not be, but typically this is how it starts.
Yeah.
So we're really screwed up with monetary policy. We've got banks that are unregulated, which I think you and I, coming from whatever perspective, agree that the Fed's got to go. These banks who are lending themselves trillions of dollars, they've got to go. They've got to reset like everybody else, or bye-bye. I don't need Citibank. Why do I need Citibank? I got my local credit union. Why do I need them? So there are a lot of issues kind of that are on the surface and that, or maybe deeper rather, but all we're hearing right now is yelling and screaming and let me throw a Molotov cocktail. And that I'm telling you what, Reed, what that is doing is it's making it difficult for people to think logically about these issues, and they really need to, because as I think you mentioned it already, none of that stuff is really going to help them. You're going to stand there at the protest. They're going to feel good for 10 minutes that they burned down a black-owned business, all right, which is crazy. They're going to go home. Yeah, I stuck it to the man. No, you stuck it to your neighbor. That's who you stuck it to. So, I got nothing. I don't know what to add to that. It's a weird situation. I'm wondering how the Libertarians, and I think I've asked you this before, how do they go about this when it comes to economics? How do they...
You asked. All right. Someone you all who are watching should go listen to is Peter Schiff, because he's going to be way better and more informed at describing all these things than I do. He just went on Joe Rogan's show, and you have to get by the arrogance, because he is a little bit bombastic, but what he is saying makes sense. Like, ignore the persona, listen to what he's saying, and you'll be amazed. So a lot of those problems that you talk about and people on the left talk about, like wealth inequality, low wages, living paycheck to paycheck, these are things that libertarians talk about all the time. And you mentioned the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is central to all these problems. It's central to inflation. It's central to our monetary system favoring the banks and screwing over the little guy. So what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of regulations that are supposedly put in place to help the consumer don't help the consumer, they help the producer. So if you have a government guaranteed loan, it's sold as though it's helping you. Oh, perfect, I got a loan, the government's backing it. I'm good to go, right? That's the perception. What that does is it allows the producer, whether it's a college or a car manufacturer, whatever it is, they can jack their prices as high as they want to, because they know that the loan is 100% insured by the government. And then you have government-backed banks. So what does that allow the banks to do? It allows them to be stupid with their money. It allows them to spend it on whatever they want. You have government-backed businesses through bailouts and subsidies. They don't have to be responsible. They can give money to whatever they want. They can spend it on whatever they want, and they don't have to worry about the repercussions, because Uncle Sam is going to bail them out. So what do you do? How do you make them act responsibly? Well, you hold them accountable for their actions, which is letting them fail. This is something that people don't get about capitalism. Whenever there's a recession, they say, oh, capitalism's failed. They don't. The whole point of capitalism is that failure is allowed to happen, and what you have to do is you have to allow these bad businesses, these bad banks, these bad companies, you have to let them go bankrupt, because we don't do that. Every recession we have, we bail them out, and then there's a moral hazard, because they don't have to worry about any repercussions going forward, so they don't fix any of their mistakes. And then we have unnecessary businesses that we don't need anymore. Like, why did we bail out the airlines during coronavirus? Who was flying? No one was flying. And we gave billions of dollars to airlines, and some of them are starting to go out of business anyway. We gave them all that money, and they're starting to die. So, and then the other thing, the things that hurt the bottom that are portrayed as though they're there to help, like a high minimum wage. That sounds great on a surface level, right? We'll pay everybody more, so they'll make more money. What that does is, if you are a person with low skills, and especially if you're young, and the people like this are usually in poor cities, a lot of times they're minorities. If there's a $20 minimum wage, you have to be worth $20 an hour for a business to hire you. So an argument that's incorrect that a lot of people make is, oh, the high minimum wage hurts the business. No, it doesn't. The business will just hire fewer people. So you're hurting the people you're trying to help. Things like, and this, people might freak out at me for saying this, but equal pay for equal work, again, sounds great on the surface. And I agree with that concept 100%. If you're a man or a woman or black or white, I think you should get paid the same. But if you're a shitty business owner who's a racist or a sexist or something, if you are required to pay a man and a woman the same, regardless of what you want to do, then you're only going to hire men. Why would you hire women? Like if you only hire men to do the job, and isn't it better if the woman is allowed to get hired for less than not getting a job? These ideas, they sound really terrible at first because they're not politically correct, but if you really start dissecting them and you really start thinking about how they'll be effective on society, you realize, wow, a lot of these things that sound great when you first hear them, they're not. And what I would compare it to is our foreign policy. It sounds great to go liberate the Iraqis from Saddam Hussein. Sounds great to, spread freedom around the world. These ideas sound great, but when you look at how they actually work, once you get the system in motion, you realize it does not work. It's time to just stop. So it's the idea of interventionism. Libertarians are against it on a foreign policy perspective, but also on a domestic policy. I compare it a lot to forest fires. So, forest fires are bad, right? Any forest fire is bad. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but until about 20 years ago, the previous 100 years, the Park Service and just the government tried to stop all forest fires from happening. We just put them out, and what that did is it built up a lot of underbrush, and it made it so that when a fire happens now, it is like 5 times as horrible, and the fires get so hot that it melts the dirt into glass, and nothing can grow in the dirt for 1,000 years. So the Park Service and the Department of the Interior, they're letting forest fires run their course now and just trying to contain them, because they realize that a forest fire is a natural occurrence that has to happen. We should have the same idea with recessions. They have to be allowed to happen. You have to allow companies to go out of business. This idea that we can just fix all the problems by using quantitative easing and throwing money at it, it's just like putting out a forest fire, and then later on you have a bigger one that comes through and causes even more problems. But go watch Peter. I've listened to Peter Schiff. He's a great guy to listen to on it, and he has all the terminology and the knowledge that I wish I had. But
it's all right. As long as he's not related to Adam Schiff, I'll be happy to watch.
Yeah, people them all the time, and it's like, no, not Adam, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah, because I couldn't take listening to Adam Schiff for more than 30 seconds. Puts me into a semi-comatose state, so I try to stay away from that. Let me address some of what you said, which you made very good sense, talking economics and talking basically free market principles with controls that we all have to kind of take into account. We didn't have this Federal Reserve thing at the beginning of our existence, and you can kind of look through the history and see how we didn't have these constant recessions and explosions and depressions and then this Federal Reserve Bank, which a lot of people don't even know isn't actually federal. See, right. This was just a brilliant naming strategy. It's it's hard to make an analogy to it, but the bank isn't really reserve currency, number one, and number two, it's not federal. So again, it's kind of like Planned Parenthood. Hate to throw that out there, but you're not really Planning Parenthood if you're going to Planned Parenthood. Just saying, okay? And I know those of you who are more pro-choice might not appreciate that analogy, but I put it out there. We need to be truthful with each other. If you're pro-abortion, just say you're pro-abortion. If you're pro-life, say you're pro-life, and just leave it at that. So, but what's funny is you can't even talk about those issues anymore because the world's on fire. We had these nice little friendly debates, about maybe they weren't friendly, but we were arguing about cultural issues, and now because of cultural Marxism, there's really no way to talk about cultural issues because you might get canceled.
Right.
But let me get back to your economic stuff here. There seems to be this notion, mostly on the left, but it's now starting to creep into even what I would call neoconservatism to some degree, that we can kind of do what they do a little bit over here because they do it and they make their constituents happy, so we're going to do it. It seems like there's a tidal wave of we don't really care about spending anymore. Let's just be honest. The country, Donald Trump did not run. Well, he might have mentioned it here and there because he tries to cover, he used to try to cover all things. The Tea Party went away. I used to do videos where I talk about what happened to the Tea Party. Remember these guys running around, dumping tea into the harbor and saying, hey, we gotta balance that budget. We gotta control that. What happened to that out of control national debt? Is that debt clock still on right now?
Yes, 27 trillion almost, I think.
27? So,
yeah.
Unreal. So
when Trump went into office, so just for reference.
And you used to have guys like Rush Limbaugh on the radio. When I 20 years ago, when I first heard Rush Limbaugh, fiscal conservatism, cut taxes, lower spending, we're going to have... Yeah, what's weird now is a Republican will go run for office, and they'll say, yeah, we need to cut taxes. Well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're spending like a drunken sailor. What? Yeah. So you have no money coming in to the Treasury to pay these enormous debts that we have. And that's when the progressives say you can't do that. And they're right, based on the fact that you've got all of these enormous debts that you created because you printed money out of thin air. So this argument that, the lower half doesn't need to pay any taxes, and then the upper half is paying most of the taxes, and it's true that they are, by the way, it's not a secret, and the left kind of wants them to pay more. I mean, we've got to address your point, we've got to drastically overhaul and reform this if we're going to get to a place of purity like you're talking about, because you can't do any of those things that you're talking about unless you address the root causes of these problems and say to the progressive, wait a minute, this money used to be worth something. You want, and this is where I've kind of come a little in your direction, you want 15 or 20 bucks an hour for somebody. That's great. I mean, I get it, because that apartment that they're renting down the street is $1,400 a month. How are they gonna? It's a studio, or it's a one bedroom. It's like, holy crap! That shouldn't be that way. I mean, I'd rather see them put some rent controls in. But then the guy's going to say, well, how am I going to pay my utilities? How am I going to keep the place up? Because the value of this money is, let's just be honest, inflation is out of control. Yes. And tell me, maybe not with food. See, they kind of keep it in pockets in places where you go, okay, I can still buy food. But if I want to go rent a house or mortgage a house, mortgage is actually cheaper probably than renting if you can put a down payment on a house. I'd highly recommend it. I'd find a way to do it, because the biggest ripoff right now is in, trying to rent things. But we've got to get those things under control, or I don't know, we're going to be, again, there's a coin shortage. There's a reason there's a coin shortage. Much like this COVID-19 thing, there seems to be a reason why more people are testing positive. I'm not trying to conflate the two things, but I find that there are parallels. And I just want to go like this, Reed. I'm like, no, I'm not seeing this, man. Please turn it off. And I do. I just go click, and it goes away.
So as far as solutions, the Libertarian Party is the only one that wants to end the Federal Reserve. And there are arguments for why it was first put in place. But a lot of people don't realize the Federal Reserve does the opposite of why it was put in place. It was put in place to expand the money supply during times of economic prosperity. Now it does the opposite. It expands the money supply when we're in recession. So it's the complete opposite of what it was for. And now there's absolutely, like you said, it's not really federal, and it doesn't really have a
reserve
anymore. So it's a complete joke. It's like the mafia running our monetary system. So we do have to end the Federal Reserve first, and that is, that's the first thing we got to do. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, the idea that that we can just have the rich pay for everything, and we can lower taxes on everyone else. I think if you confiscated all of the wealth from everyone who made more than $1 million a year, I think it's $600 billion. That's all of their wealth. We just took it all away. $600 billion. So the idea that we can just raise taxes on them and we can pay for literally everything that we want to talk about, reparations, Medicare for all, UBI, no. I mean, what we got to do is, if you want these programs, if you want Medicare for all, if you want UBI, if you want reparations, if you want free college, whatever it is, if you want endless war, if you want, any of these, you have to end the Federal Reserve so that you have honest budgeting, because we have funny money right now, and it's unsustainable, because a lot of people don't realize that the debt that we accrue, other countries buy it, and entities within our country buy it, and they expect to get paid back on those bonds that they buy. There's this idea, but now what we're doing is the Federal Reserve is starting to monetize its own debt.
Yes.
And we have the world reserve currency right now, and the rest of the world is burdening our stupidity because they use the dollar as the world reserve currency. Do you think they're going to do that forever? If we just keep financing whatever we want and just bending all the rules? And they can't do that. They don't have a Federal Reserve. They can't just manipulate the currency the way we do. Do you think China and Russia are going to put up with that, forever? I mean, there's going to be a point where they finally buck us, and then inflation is just going to take off. The bottom's going to fall out of the dollar, and you think we have problems now with rioting and income inequality? Just wait. So much. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was Bernanke or one of those guys. Who's the current Fed chairman now? I can never remember names to him.
Mnuchin.
Okay, I think it was Steve Mnuchin.
Yeah.
And I think they asked him a few months ago on some show how they were able to produce so much money. Basically, did you produce money out of thin air? And he said he used a kind of a funny expression, which was interesting. He said, "Oh, we just kind of marked it up. We just went into the computer and we marked it up, kind of like when you go into the grocery store and you mark up the price of something. We marked it up." Yeah. And I'm thinking, that is the most cavalier and most. I mean, what he basically said was, we took a magic wand and we created money out of thin air. We digitized. We monetized, whatever phrase you want, because really we're heading toward a cashless society, whether people want to address that problem and that issue or not. This is why there's a coin shortage. This is, it's already being thrust in our direction that, hey, we don't really need these pennies. They're not really worth anything anyway. So, just get rid of them. Nickels, nickels, they're not much better. Dimes, they're a little better, but, soon it'll just be quarters and dollars, and then the quarters will go away, and then you'll just be paid. Why do we need this paper? We'll just give you this card, and I don't know, there's a part of me, maybe it's my Christian sort of end times brain sort of ticking when you hear things like this, but man, that's
your
scary.
right hand in your forehead that has six on them.
I mean, my son's like, I'm not gonna take it. Bill Gates is coming, man. He's got the COVID remedy, and he's gonna have a little chip. So you put the chip in and you just swipe your arm and you can get so much, you can updates from Microsoft daily downloaded directly right to you. So it's Huxley, it's Orwell, it's all of it's probably your friend Ayn Rand, who yes, admittedly I've read some Ayn Rand. And I couldn't get through the entire book. I went through, the book is like 1,300 or 1,400 pages, and I think I did about 1,000. Yeah. She really had a very dark, consciousness, but I can't say that she was wrong. I don't know if we can all. I mean, if you're out in Colorado, right, you're gonna fly down to Galt's Gulch. You know, I'll keep your contact information. I may need to find you someday. You know, I know the story and that little airplane. I have to go down into the valley, and I remember that was a pretty interesting book, and it did introduce me to some very libertarian, like the worker bees against the people that aren't willing to work. And you know, I get that. I mean, I'm in a position in my life where I actually don't work very hard, so I really appreciate that. But I do get up every day and try to create content and know that if the fruits of my labor, as long as I don't get censored, banned, or whatever, I should get something for that. And I think there is something to be said about, and this is something I've kind of drifted back to more of a traditional sort of unity position, is that you have to work if you want to eat. It's just I'm sorry, and sometimes you have to start with jobs that nobody else wants to do, you know. So but I think we're in a generation, and we've been 2 or 3 generations kind of removed. My parents had an incredible work ethic. My older brother and sister, I mean, everybody I knew worked, and they worked right when they could start working. You know, 15, 14. I was doing jobs 12, 13 years old, mopping floors and stuff like that. And all work is good and honorable, but that's not being taught anymore. What's being taught is that, oh, that's a menial job, or you know, I should be making $20. Well, what do you know? Do you know anything? You know. So again, I understand the economic issues that minority communities face, and I know that's contributing to their anger and their frustration. But this is, you know, 20 or 30 years of, I don't want to say propaganda, but sort of like, what's the word? It's like bringing people down, like saying, well, you're never going to succeed, so just get used to it. It's like, I hate to use a George W. Bush quote. It's probably one of the best things he's ever said, which again, I mean, it doesn't cancel out there are weapons of mass destruction and we need to go find them, but it is a worthy quote, and he probably didn't write it. So I'll just say there is this soft bigotry of low expectations that people have for certain people, whether they be people of color, you could be a poor white person from Appalachia. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like you take a look at somebody and go, you're not, the elitists just kind of go, oh, well, they're never going to be anything. So let's just throw them the breadcrumbs, let them eat some cake. And as long as we can take care of them, they'll keep voting for us. And as a strategy, that's kind of working. I hate to say it. It's kind of working. And I don't know how much longer the country can survive if that's going to continue. Like I said, the neocons, the neo-libs, I mean, rock solid conservatives, there are a few of them left, but not too many. And obviously progressives who are like the champions, you know, they're the ones saying, yeah, we're going to go in there and we'll fight for the working class. But really the well that you want to pull from, if you don't have workers to pull from that well, I don't know where you're going to get all this stuff to give to people. I don't know where it's going to come from. And that's again where I've kind of migrated back to somewhat in the middle, like, okay, I hate to ask this question, but how are you going to pay for this stuff? Unless they take over, unless the progressives can just go to the Federal Reserve and just take it over, in which case,
then you can just print whatever you want.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually why a lot of the things you were just talking about, that's why I started this channel. That's why I went on Twitter, because I'm 26 years old. I've got a lot of life ahead of me, and I have seen the deterioration of America and working America, because people my age can't do anything anymore. And it might be disingenuous hearing that from like a 60-year-old guy, but I grew up with these people. I went to school with them. I work with them. They're fucking useless. I'm just gonna say it.
It's on your channel.
Yeah, no, they can't do anything. They can't use a wrench. They can't use a screwdriver. They can't drive a stick shift. Like, they just can't do anything. And it's because we've taken away what you were talking about. You know, when I was 16, I started working at a lumber yard for $8 an hour, stacking lumber. And then I just worked my way up. I got my CDL while I was there. I left making $12 an hour. Got another job at $18 an hour. And that's just how it worked. Like, you start out at the bottom, you learn how to do everything, and you work your way up. You prove yourself to be more useful. But now it's this idea that, if you're not getting paid $20 an hour, they're not, it's almost demeaning. Like, you deserve more. And we need to get rid of this idea that you deserve anything. You only deserve what you make yourself worth. And just in life in general, like, people expect trust. They expect respect. They expect, responsibility. You don't just get these things. You have to prove to other people that you are worth them. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's gone. Like, people my age don't think that way.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you. You may know the answer to this, and I'm not sure. I used to hear, and Bernie Sanders, right up until the very end of his campaign, we're the richest country on the face of the earth. We're the richest. Are we really the richest country on the face of the earth?
I mean,
per capita.
Maybe nominally, but are we, in actual value? I mean, we have the most dollars, but think of how little we produce, how helpless the average American family is after 1 week of not getting a paycheck. Like, let's just compare ourselves to other countries who went through coronavirus. They've had the same, disease they had to deal with, but a lot of those countries could make it a month without work.
Yeah.
People might. Yeah, I mean, Rand Paul had a great speech on this when the HEROES Act was going through. He voted against it, and he said we could confiscate all the money in China, but it doesn't do us any good. You have to have capital, and capital is goods and services. And there are things we don't have. Like, you can have all the money in the world. If you don't have any food, who cares? If you don't have any quality of life, who cares? And so, in that sense, I think we're probably not the richest country in the world. I mean, per capita at least. I doubt it. I don't really know the figures.
Yeah, I think the richest country, from what I remember reading, is Qatar. Believe it or not, Qatar or Saudi Arabia, one of those two. It has to do with, obviously, the natural resources that they have, and they have a smaller population. So, the value of each individual, the unemployment rate in Qatar, I think, was like 2.3%. So, Again, you can have an environmentalist discussion at this point, but, I don't know. As far as, that's a good segue. I mean, you were talking about the Green New Deal, and a lot of us were talking about that, and that in progressive land, that is gospel. You say Green New Deal, and they go, it's got to be. By the way, the Green New Deal that AOC was putting forth was basically a clipboard of non-binding resolution or statements like, okay, we want this, this, and this by 2030. It's not a law. Nobody has passed legislation. These are just pie-in-the-sky things. The Green Party is a little bit more serious, and so if you like that kind of stuff, go to the Green Party, because they have no chance of winning, but go to the Green Party and vote for it. But how much of this is doable and practical? And, as far as our natural resources go, the climate seems to be warming up. My position on this has always been, okay, and then my next statement is usually, so, because I don't know, because if we all stop driving cars, which we're not going to do, we saw there was a moderate reduction, I will say, during the pandemic, where I think that was the silver lining. People are saying, look, if we would just all die off, we won't produce CO2 and the planet will survive. Right. But then I've read some interesting articles about, hey, why did they call Greenland Greenland? Why did Greenland, one of the coldest places on the planet, get the name Greenland? Well, at one point in time, apparently it was more green than it was white. So I mean, is warming necessarily a bad thing for the planet, number one? Obviously, some third world populations would tell you, yes, it's a very bad thing. But in the midst of coronavirus, we're allowing the third world to kind of starve to death. And that's, I think, part of another problem that when capitalism does work, it can literally feed most of the planet. That's what we were doing for quite some time. That's why it was called the breadbasket of America. Now it's kind of like the, it's like the loaf of bread of America at this point. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's not like what it used to be. America seems to have fallen off of that perch. But as far as climate change, I mean, I'm assuming you do believe that there is climate change occurring. I'm interested to hear your opinions on why it's occurring and what can be done about it.
Yeah, okay. So I was a Republican growing up, and I lived in New Hampshire. We didn't really see much effects of it in New Hampshire, so I didn't really believe in it. I traveled to all 50 states when I was 21, and I went to Alaska. And when you start heading up north, it's very obvious that the glaciers are melting and that it's increasing every year at the rate at which they're melting. They had mileposts for the glaciers. And, 1800 was 2 miles away from the glacier. 1900 is like 100 feet from 1800.
Yep.
And 1810 is like 500 feet. And then, it's just like and then by the time you get to the glacier, every year is like 30 feet. It's taken off like crazy. So, yeah, definitely climate change is a thing, and it is commensurate with the Industrial Revolution and the increased use of fossil fuels. So I think it's not a conspiracy to say that we have an effect on climate change. Where I start to take issue is when they start putting specific years and numbers on when the no point of return line is, because they've done that before. I don't really, so when they say we have 12 years or we're screwed, and then you put that into context with political parties, that there's got to be some political manipulation to a figure that's that exact. 12 years, we need to reduce emissions by this much or we're dead. I'm going to be skeptical. So, but anyway, I think we should try to reduce emissions, but the left also has their own war on science like the right does, and their war on science is through solutions. They think we can just go to all solar and wind in 10 years.
Nope.
There's no way.
Nope.
And the other thing is, they want to convert to all battery-powered vehicles. If you do that before you convert the grid, you're running those cars off of coal, which is worse than gasoline. So you've got to be realistic. You've got to, if you really want to if you want to make fossil fuels outdated, you have to convert the grid first, and you have to look at all sources of energy. You have to look at nuclear, and nuclear is very different than it was in the 70s. And the left is way against nuclear when it is very reliable. It's very, very, very safe. And especially with new technologies with thorium reactors, there's very, very little pollution. If you want to get rid of coal, you should support nuclear, and maybe not in places like California where there are earthquakes, but there's common sense where you can use these things. And then the left is also, no, we can't put up windmills there. They're going to kill the birds. Or no, we can't build a hydroelectric dam there that's going to kill the fish. But they're not willing to make any cuts in their own personal life. It's like, okay, why don't you stop driving your car? Why don't you stop, using so much electricity? And a lot of them live in the inner city where they don't even see how any of this stuff is produced. I did line work for like 6 years. So I saw a lot of the power plants we had. In New Hampshire, we had this big coal plant that got shut down because we were going to do a project called the Northern Pass. There's a bunch of hydro dams up in Quebec, Canada that are already in place, and they produce like 500% of the amount of electricity that Quebec needs. So in New Hampshire and Connecticut and even some in New York, they were going to run power lines down along the Connecticut River, and they were going to have to cut down like 8 miles of trees. And environmentalists shot that down. So the coal plant opened back up, all our natural gas plants opened back up. New Hampshire would have been pretty much 100% run off of hydroelectric power, and now we're burning coal again. And this coal plant, I've worked at it because there's a substation there. There's like 3 acres of a size of coal pile that gets burned like every week, and trains have to transport all that coal in from wherever they're getting it. And there's ash on top of the houses in the surrounding areas. It's right next to a river. You know, it's like, what do you stand for? Do you actually, it's more like, it's kind of back with what I was talking about with the left and police reform. They don't want actual solutions. They just want to rail against what's going on.
Yeah.
You give them something practical, like, okay, how about this? No, that's not, you know, it doesn't fit in. But hey, I've actually got to start wrapping up here. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on the show, big time. Thanks for having me on your show. And I know this is probably going to be uploaded on yours. If anyone's watching this on Dave's show, follow me on YouTube, The Naturalist Capitalist. I have a ton of libertarian candidates I'm going to be interviewing, and you'll hear from a party that actually believes in civil rights, actually believes in responsible spending. So come follow me, and then Dave, I'll just let you close out with whatever you want to say.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for doing this today. I know it was kind of short notice, and you know, I think I needed like a kick in the pants a little bit, because the last couple of weeks I've just felt even more alienated from the world, and you know, if anything, this was kind of cathartic to talk through some issues. I am definitely still open to voting Libertarian. In Florida, you know, it's weird down here. Like I said, it's very Republican. And then there are different varieties of Republicans that you have to kind of wade through to see. You have to really be careful what you're going to get. Are you going to get a neoliberal warmonger, which I don't want? I'm willing to, you know, look at somebody who's got more of a plan to maybe pull us out of some countries, which would be nice. But libertarians have, like I say, at the end of it, as a protest vote or as a vote, maybe actually to put the Libertarians on the map in the future, a vote for the candidate Jo Jorgensen might not be a bad idea at this stage. I mean, I ain't voting green, I can tell you that. I'm done with that little excursion. And you know what you're getting with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So I think people owe it to themselves maybe to at least take the Libertarian quiz. I think I did that a number of years ago, and I kind of was on the more conservative end, but I was certainly within that, well within that circle. And it was very, I was like surprised, like, man, maybe I'm a libertarian. So, and there are a lot of people in the Libertarian Party. It's more of a bigger tent than a lot of other parties, where you guys can kind of wrestle with some of those more secondary issues. I mean, you kind of agree on the big core issues. Most of you agree on those, but then there are a few of those issues, monetary policy, I know, and there's some other things that you guys kind of wrestle with different viewpoints on. But I definitely would recommend folks check Reed's channel out and keep watching him, because he's a rising star. He's got a video that went viral, which I'm jealous about. So good for you, though, man. Good for you. Yeah. It's people need to hear some alternative viewpoints. So keep talking, and maybe more people will start listening.
All right, yeah, and everyone go watch Dave's channel too. It's
Unity Politics, yeah.
Yeah, I like watching him because the big thing about you is you're not gonna entrench yourself in a position. I mean, what's cool about you is I've seen you change your mind like 10 times, and I think that's good. Like, that's not a bad thing. Like, there's in this world today when things are nuts, we should be kind of fluid and adjusting with everything that's going on. But I really thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll do it again in the future.
All right, man. Thanks. Take care.
All right. Yeah, that was good. I've got to run, unfortunately, but thanks, man. I appreciate it. So.